All right, so we got one more just coming in now, so we'll. There you go,
mate.
Simon. Well
Sorry,
done.
everyone.
It's all right. You haven't missed anything because I just got logged out as well, so back on board.
All right.
Just remember to turn your phone around, mate.
I'll go. Yeah, I got confused. I forgot which way I was meant to do it. All right. There we go.
All right, no worries. Well, I'm sure Chris will be back, and Will's hopefully still there. What he's brewing? He's back. Okay,
That was the one.
perfect.
That's right. That was the one I got.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining in. Like I said, we're recording this session, so for the people that miss out, they can play it back later. I'd just firstly like to welcome Alex from Slow Lane Brewing. Thanks for joining us, Alex. We actually haven't met face to face. We've messaged a couple of times, but I'm a big fan of your work and the beers that you've been brewing up there. Can we just start by you just giving us a bit of introduction about yourself and Slow Lane Brewing?
Sure. So, me and my wife Yvonne started Slow Lane Brewing about 2 years ago. So we're based in Botany in Sydney, and Botany just near the airport. We specialize in old world European styles is how we describe it, but we say modern takes on it because some of our beers are kind of straight up trying to be replicas of European styles, but then we do this in more interesting kind of more modern takes on some beers, especially sort of sour beers and hoppy beers as well.
Yep.
So yeah, we have always brew 1,200 liters at a time, small batches, brew a lot of different styles. We always try and have a diverse range, some lagers instead of either drinking ales, some sours and some darker beers as well. Definitely Belgian styles is some of my favorite styles and some that we're definitely well known for.
Yep.
The beer we sell the most of is probably this refractory Belgian blonde. It's a 4.8%. It's kind of what you would call a single.
Yeah.
It's the beers that are quite often not really sold outside of Belgium. They'll serve it at the monasteries, maybe on tap some places, but they're more what the monks might drink themselves, not what's exported.
Yeah.
And then triple is also one of our bigger sellers. That's sort of won a few awards, so we're kind of constantly brewing new batches of that.
Yeah, terrific. I've had the refractory, and it's an awesome beer. I mean, I to be honest, I don't think I've had a beer from you that I haven't enjoyed. Whilst it might not be a big deal to you, you're one of the few breweries that I actually buy beers from. So I get a lot of free. I get a lot of free beers sent to me. I get a lot of samples. I generally got a pretty full fridge, but I'm quite happy to go onto your website and buy beers from you guys because I love your beers. I love what you're doing. Can you tell me why are you interested in sort of European beers and Belgian beers? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so, I think when I first got into kind of trying diverse range of beers was, that was what was available in Sydney at the time. If you went to Dan Murphy's or bottle shops, most of the interesting stuff was imports from Germany and Belgium. So that's it was my first kind of taste of non-mainstream lager beer. And then I guess many years later, I was in the US. I moved to New York for my old career and corporate job, and then got really into the US beer scene over there. But I still really liked those breweries in the US that were doing the European styles. It was Belgian styles or German styles or barrel aged sours, that kind of thing. More so than the typical IPAs and stuff that more common over there.
Lovely.
And then done a few trips to Germany and Belgium and just love it's not just the actual taste of the beer. It's everything that goes around beer, the culture and the way the pride they take in serving it, and the glassware and foam, and just all those things that are kind of missing in some like typical bar in the US or pub in Australia sometimes.
I hear you. I fell in. My story is not dissimilar. But I fell in love. I went into Europe backpacking when I was young, 20 something, in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and fell in love with the culture of beer in Europe. Loved the beers as well, because there was no real comparison to what we were drinking back home. So I loved the beer, but I also fell in love with the culture and the history. And you're right, there's just something about that whole European, atmosphere around the way they make beer, they sell beer, the history of the beer, the stories behind the beer. And I think, as in Australia and America, we've tried to create stories, but they're not really the same, have the same authenticity. When the story about the brewery that opened up here, like how two mates had a passion for brewing and got out of the IT industry, and it's like, yeah, cool story, mate. Whereas you go back to the Europeans and you hear the way that this style's evolved over centuries, and who brewed it first and where they brewed it and the water that they used, and it's just like it's a totally different story, isn't it?
Yeah, hard to compete with hundreds of years of history.
Yeah, well, I mean, like we're only 200 odd years old as a country. Well, sorry, as a white settled country, so it is very hard to compete with 1,000 years of history. Anyway, so I mean, I don't want this to be a dry argument, and I'll pour my beer in a second, but. So today we're going to talk about the Belgian Dark Strong Ale, which also goes under the name of Quad or Quadruple. So tell us a little bit about your take on this style of beer.
Yep. So we've brewed. I guess we have brewed another beer called Solitude in the past, which we called a Belgian Dark Strong Ale, and we brewed. Oh, you got that? Nice. We brewed this one, Fourfold, which is called a Belgian Quadruple, and there's a lot of overlap, or they're arguably the same thing. But I guess if there is a difference, I guess the Quadruple is normally a bit stronger in alcohol and has a bit more sweetness. But otherwise, they're quite similar. So the way we brew these dark, strong Belgian beers is, I guess. It's all about there's no real hop presence. It's all about the malts and the yeast. And with the malts, we rely heavily on dark candy syrup to get a lot of those sort of characteristic flavors that to taste like the Belgian ones do. And I don't think you can get that just by using just typical malts. So we use a decent amount of the dark candy syrup, and then otherwise it's all about the yeast. Yeah.
So is that technically an adjunct then, if it's an addition? The syrup?
I mean, I guess. Yeah, I guess it's an adjunct. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a brewer, okay. So any questions around brewing like that? I mean, I get the style. I mean, I get the basic understanding, but I'm not a brewer and I haven't homebrewed. So, I'm always interested to learn more. So Simon is from Beerducation, and he's a bit of a home brewer. And Will, who's joining us from across the Dutch today in New Zealand, he's a home brewer as well. So. You guys might have some questions for Alex about the brewing techniques. I'm just going to go quickly over some of the basics of the style. So the history is it's one of 4 styles which comes with the BJCP guidelines under the heading of monastic beers, or it's really that Abbey monastery style or Trappist, but it depends on the actual variety, because Trappist is an appellation or a word which is reserved for a handful of breweries. But essentially, these are the sort of beers that often brewed in monasteries. They go back to around the 12th century. I think it can depend on different versions of history, but sort of around that area. And as you alluded to, with some of the other beers that you brew, there's four styles in this area, and they are the single, the Dubbel, which is double, the Belgian triple, and then the Belgian dark strong ale, which is the quad. So that's the one that we're going to be trying today, the Fourfold. Just some real basic statistics on this. So the ABV range goes from about 8 to 12 or 13%. 12%, 8 to 12%. The recommended serving temperature for a beer like this is 13 to 16 degrees. So hopefully you've had yours out for a while and letting it warm up. I've had mine here while we're talking. Chris asked about the recommended glassware. So a tulip glass or a chalice. I've got the tulip here. I don't have a chalice, but anything that's big and bold and round that's going to let all the esters and give it plenty of opportunity. Even a big red wine glass, something along that line, will do the trick. So some other styles of this beer, which I guess are well known. So the Westvleteren, the Westvleteren 12, which has been sort of described as the world's best beer. It's going back a while now, but it's sort of held that position for some time. It was an Abbey brewed beer that was in very short supply, and you used to be only able to get it when you're at the monastery and only in small volumes. But over the years, that's changed a little bit, and you can now buy it either online, and some companies are importing it into Australia. So I've had the opportunity to try a couple of those beers. Have you actually tried that, Alex? And did you try it in Belgium, or have you tried it here?
Yeah, I've tried it in Belgium. Like when we're over there, tried it many times.
Yeah.
So it's like, as much as I could get my hands on. And yes, when you're over there, it's pretty easy. Most like beer bars and cafes and stuff will have it available.
Yeah.
It's ridiculously cheap compared to what people try and charge for it over here.
Yeah. I actually, it's going back a while now, but I imported a case, and they landed here. I can't remember the actual cost. It was something like 250 euros or something for a case, but it was about another 200 euros to get it here. I think it ended up working at about $40 a bottle or something. But I just had a whole lot of people that wanted to buy it, so basically pre-sold it all before it even landed here, and then it was just like handing it out to all your mates and stuff like that. It was pretty cool. Has anybody else tried that beer?
Yes, I have one in your cellar.
Yes, you did try one in my cellar. Simon, have you tried it?
No.
Will, have you tried it? Don't know if he can hear us. He's brewing.
No, I haven't.
No?
I've literally trying to cool down this German at the moment, so trying to multitask. Yeah.
That's all right. No worries. Some other styles, or some other brands that are quite popular for brewing that is Chimay and Rochefort, and also the Saint Bernardus, which there's a really cool story if you want to have a read. They actually were brewing the beer for Westvleteren for a while. Sorry if my pronunciation's not that great. I'm not Belgian. But they were brewing it for quite a while, and then they sort of went back to brewing their own. So there's a pretty cool story about that, which I'll share afterwards. I've got all the details of today's event. I've got it in a document which I'll punch up after. So that's a little bit about
those two breweries are actually quite close together. Like if you ever get over to Belgium, I highly recommend. There's the town nearby is Popperange, I think.
Yeah.
And we just stayed there and rented bikes, and you can cycle out through all the hop fields to both those breweries, West Belteren and St. Bernardus, and super nice ride. And it's just very magical, just like going through like hop fields that are actually using those hops in the beer, and just the old, well, they're not super old school breweries. I guess they're quite, well, at least St. Bernardus is like quite modern brewery, but like at least the outside of it looks like historic.
That'd be pretty cool riding too. I think, I reckon, the idea of riding through the countryside in Belgium and trying different beers and visiting monasteries, I think that's pretty appealing.
But then we had an embarrassing incident where we went to St. Bernardus, we got beers there, and then we went to West Belgium, and we didn't want to like bring the other breweries' beers inside, so we like left them just on the back of our bike. We're like, no one's going to steal them. But then it pissed down rain, and it was like the cardboard beer like packaging like got all wet, and the bottles fell out. So when we came out, the bottles were smashed in their car park.
Oh no!
Oh,
it was only a short ride back again. Hopefully, you went back and got some more.
Oh, not all the bottles off. We still had plenty.
Okay. All right, so that's a little bit of the history of the style. A very abridged history. Obviously, 1,000. It's been going since the 12th century. So we're not going to get it all into a 1 hour session, but there's certainly lots of history to pull back from there. So, and then of course the beer we're going to try today, or some I'm trying. I think Chris has got the Fourfold, and Simon's got the. Which one have you got? The Solitude. Yep. And I don't know if Will's got a quad that he can drink, but hopefully he's got something nice and dark and stormy. But tell us a little bit about the Fourfold beer, Alex, and give us your take on sort of your take on the style and what you've brewed with this beer.
So it's I guess in terms of like the malt of the beer, like we use, which is I think what most Belgian breweries use. We use like a whole lot of cinnamon, like Pilsner malt, which is like a Belgian malt that is imported into Australia, and it's using that Pilsner malt just gives a nice like backbone to the beer and make sure it's not too like sweet and cloying. And then we sort of back that up with some darker malts, some like dark Munich and this Belgian aromatic malt and special B, which gives some of that like kind of like nutty and dark fruit kind of characters, as well as the dark candy syrup that I mentioned before. And just like lightly hop, just like bittering hops. We use like German hop like Tettnang, but the bitterness, the hops are just there to like provide some bitterness, so it's not too like sweet and cloying. And then it's all about the yeast really. So we use like an Abbey style yeast, like a dry yeast from Lauerland, which is supposedly like taken from Chimay yeast. And I guess we use this yeast for a lot of our beers, and I guess the way the Lauerland talks about it is you can get very different flavors from it depending on like how you use it and the fermentation temperatures. So for this beer, we want more like dark fruit and sort of raisin, and we don't want that like spice and like banana and like tropical notes so much. So we ferment this one quite cool. But say we use the same yeast of like our triple, and we do that quite hot to get different flavors out of it. And then I guess the other thing we do, I guess our brewery and like our fermenters, is we have like quite short, like wide fermenters, so that the beer fermenting is like it's only like a relatively shallow kind of volume, which is meant to promote, I guess, more like ester production than if you have like a really like small like tall tank. I think that's what the Chapter's breweries now, like they only like half fill their tanks because they don't want too much like pressure on the yeast, and it like impacts the flavor profile.
So sorry, you half fill the tank, which allows it to get more the yeast to be more active. Is that right? And then you get a higher ester. Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess the way tanks are made these days, like they're quite tall just to make better use of space.
Yeah.
But then the more like higher like liquid volume is like the more pressure going down on the yeast.
Right.
So like it produces a different flavor profile. So like I think that they have modern tanks. Like they used to always use open fermenters, but now they've switched to like modern kind of beer tanks over in Belgium. But to try and get the same flavor profile they have with the old tanks, they just like don't fill. They just fill them halfway up the tank, but it's not as much pressure.
Okay. And I've seen, like, I don't know, every time I sort of Google or look at Belgian style beers and breweries and stuff, they often use like the old copper style tanks. They seem to be like they do seem to be like wider style as well, like not the tall, narrow stainless. Is that for the same reason?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, like copper, I think that's just what tanks used to be made of. And I guess these days, if someone has a copper brew house, it's just for looks rather than any functional thing. So, and I guess most of the Trappist breweries now, I think are quite, I guess apart from West Belgium, they're quite large and, commercial, and like they would have like very modern equipment.
Yeah.
But definitely used to have all like open, like sort of smallish open tanks.
Right.
I think West Belgium still does.
Okay.
Just the more big.
Simon, Will, have you got any questions for Alex about that brewing technique?
Oh, that's pretty familiar to me. The idea, you're more shallow and wider, more esters.
Yeah.
There's something weird. There's something weird about yeast. If you ferment it under pressure, it doesn't seem to produce esters. It's a bit. We don't really know why. I don't think. At least I don't. But it's just something people observe. I've got a question about. So you mentioned your triple and these quads are done with the same yeast, and I assume like Chimay, for example, when they're doing theirs, they're using a house strain. They're not changing up yeast between these. But as you mentioned, very different ester profiles. And you just explained, hey, we ferment this quad cooler and the triple hotter to give us different flavoured profiles from the yeast. Is that how these breweries would do that traditionally? Like, would they be brewing their triples in summer and their quads in winter to try and, I mean, traditionally before we've got all this temperature control and things like that, is there a tradition out there with these sort of things? Or, I don't know, just my question about that.
Not that I know of, and I think like a lot of these styles, like they may have been making beer for a long time, but like these, especially these like higher ABV styles, I think they're not like they kind of maybe started making them in 1940 or something. They're not, that particular style is not super old. So like the stuff I've read, they probably had some kind of cooling, but then generally with these beers, a lot of the time they just put it in at a certain temperature and then just kind of let it pre-rise to an extent. Like they're definitely not as reliant on cooling. And then I know there's like, I think the Westmail yeast, like that's also used by West Beltran, I think. But they use Westmail ferments it kind of cool, and this West Beltran ferments it hot. So their beers have like the same yeast, but different profiles. Like
cool. Will, have you got any questions you want to ask Alex about the brewing?
Yeah, so in terms of when you're saying cooler, so are you thinking, is that more like sort of like that 17, 18, like that sort of cool, or are you still going around the 20 mark?
Yeah, I think we started at like about 18 and let it kind of go up to 21 or something, where like some of our other Belgian beers, like we would let them go up to like high 20s, much warmer.
Wow.
It's also like these stronger alcohol beers, you got to be more careful, like with like your fermentation, like 'cause you can get some bad, like kind of like high alcohol, like solvency flavors. Because I guess that if you get it too hot or the yeast is not healthy, because I guess the more alcohol, the more sort of it's a tougher environment for the yeast, so you're more likely to get some undesired flavors. So it's about other reason why we want cooler on this one.
Yeah, cool. You go first.
One more quick. The other one thing I wanted to ask was, you just mentioned you used the dark candy syrup in this because it gives you that unique profile. What does the candy syrup add? Like, what's the difference that you know? Whereas if you tried to make this without that candy syrup, if you tried to do it with malts, what do you think the big difference is in flavour and maybe even aroma?
I mean, I think it gives that kind of like, it's a bit of like, because the candy syrup is basically like they just, it's like a controlled burning of sugar to get like a desired kind of like caramel and kind of like almost roasty, roasty is not the right word, flavor. So I think it gives a bit of that like caramel flavor and a bit of like
is it like the
dark fruit,
like a toffee, like the caramel toffee, sort of that the like almost like a Werther's type toffee.
So the one we use for this is much darker.
Right.
There's different like colors you can get, but we use a very dark one, like intense one for this.
Yeah.
I guess if you're using like, it also gives the beer color, and I guess if you typically to get darker colors in beer, like you'll use like roasted malts, but then you don't want like a roasted malt, like a stout or like porter like character in this kind of beer. So I think it helps you get the darker color and maybe some of those dark fruit kind of flavors and aromas. Yeah.
Interestingly, when I first had a whiff, I got a little bit of smokiness, but I'm not getting that now. I don't know whether it's just sort of warmed up a little bit. But did you?
Beautiful beet sugar smell. God, it's lovely.
Will, did you have another question? You're on mute, mate.
Sorry, are you using all Belgian? Like, are you using like you're importing Belgium type grain and stuff for the grain bill, or are you just sort of using local ingredients and doing it to so Belgian kind of recipe?
So we actually, for most of our Belgian beers, we do use like Dingemans, like Belgian malt. So I think this will be either like the majority of it would be Belgian malt, and there'd be a bit of like German malt, like I think like the dark Munich, and it would be German, but yeah, most of it would be Belgian.
Yeah, nice. So we'll talk about the beer a little bit now. I've poured mine and have been having a sip. I know you guys have been having a sip of yours too. So, Simon, do you want to sort of talk through some of the guidelines on the style and talk about
Sure.
what we're picking up?
Sure. So if you want to have a look, if you've got one in your glass, have a look, hold it up to the light if you can, and see what is it opaque? Mine's really dark that it's almost, but I can just see through it. They're really dark brown, maybe with just some mainly brown, more so, none of that ruby stuff you sometimes see. Your head, let me have a look. Your head should be, so let me read out the guidelines. Appearance should be deep amber to deep coppery brown in colour. Huge, dense, moussey, persistent cream to light tan head. Usually clear.
Yeah, I think we could have gone a bit, like this beer has higher carbonation than typical beer. Like it has about 3 volumes or just over 3 volumes of CO2, where most beers like 2.6, kind of 2.7 maybe volumes. But then Belgian beers are often like kind of 3.5 volumes. So we probably could have gone a bit higher, and that would have helped like the moussey kind of head. But we're also, because we're canning it, like you can't, you have to be a bit more careful 'cause the cans they can hold a fair bit of pressure, but not as much as like a thick bottle. So
I thought there might be something like that. I saw you bottle conditioning or can conditioning in the can, and I thought, yeah, this guy's confident.
yeah, and we carefully manage it. Like, but like the cans like could hold like 3.5 4 volumes, but then if something goes wrong and it goes higher than that, then you might have issues. So
Yeah.
Is there a reason?
that's safe.
Is there a reason? Well, no, I know there's a reason. What's your reason for going with cans over bottles for these styles of beer? Because I get it with, fresh is best and, hop driven beers or whatever, but these not most of it, a lot of the styles that you're brewing, not really hop driven beers, not really fresh is best style beers. Why did you choose to go cans?
Part of it is that's what I feel the market wants. Like, people, it's easier to sell cans. And then part of it is the kind of practicalities of cans are much easier to handle and way less, they're easier to ship. You can make up mix packs, different cans. Like, it's easier as a brewery in lots of ways.
Yeah. Well, I just, my vote anyway. If you go to bottles, I'd still buy them. So there's an interesting discussion going on around bottles and cans at the moment, and I think there was this big rush to canning, and the fresh is best type stuff, and a lot of as I said, a lot of the fresh beers, I think it makes sense, and I get it even from a logistics point of view. It's cheaper, it's lighter, it's easier for freight and all that sort of stuff. But there's also, say, a company like Bridge Roads, for instance, who've been around for quite a while and had bottles and cans, and they went with their Beechworth Pale Ale, which is one of their best-selling beers and goes throughout everywhere. They're still bottling it as well because they find a lot of their restaurants and venues want to have a bottled beer on the table as opposed to a can because it presents better. Some of my, you would know yourself, some of the really sort of sought after beers that are going around from some great breweries, whether it's Wildflower or, Van Diemen's or whatever, still bottling, here's one of my favorite beers of all time, in the big 750 Magnum and stuff like that. So there's still a bit of it going around, and I just wonder if it might have a little bit of a resurgence soon too.
Yeah, I agree. Like, this kind of beer, potentially it's better in bottles. I think cans are convenient when you're going to be doing outdoors stuff, but if you're going to be with a higher ABV beer sitting at home, you're not, it's maybe more bottles.
Yeah. And as you can see, I don't mind collecting bottles, but I don't collect cans. I just there's some cool can art going around, and again, I think there's a from a marketing perspective, cans are great because you can get a lot more on them. But I think there's something said for bottles. Anyway, I'll pass back to Simon. Sorry, mate.
Cool. So let's have a sniff. What do we smell? You've got your beer there. Whirl it around. Let's have a sniff. Oh, Chris, what do you smell?
I smell sugar. That's what I can smell.
Sugar, yeah.
And it's really sort of,
what sort of sugar?
It reminds me, I don't know whether people know about beet sugar versus cane sugar, but in Europe they don't have cane sugar. It's all sourced from beet, and you get also sort of different kinds of grade sugar, and it has a completely different aroma. I don't know why. It's maybe how it's manufactured, but that's what I pick up. It really reminds me actually of that sort of stuff in Europe.
Like I said, the first time I sniffed it, I got a little bit of smokiness, but I don't seem to be getting that now. But I'd probably describe it as more of if you were trying to make syrup with sugar and you're putting it in there and you get that nice caramelization, but then you go that little bit too far and it sort of burns. It's like that
That's
burnt,
right. Yeah.
burnt caramel, almost. It's not molasses because it's not quite that intense,
No,
but
that's right.
but it's sort of like that burnt toffee. Like, you know, you're trying to make toffee apples and you go too far and it just goes a little bit, you know, coagulated and it's sticky and whatever, and you go, oh shit, left it in for 13 seconds too long. That's what it sort of smells like to me. Burnt caramel. Not burnt, not just overcooked caramel.
And that's what the candy syrup definitely smells like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one's completely different. Absolutely, completely different. I don't know quite how to describe it. It's more. It's not. It doesn't have that beautiful sugary smell. It has more of a sort of almost a banana smell. Actually, almost.
Is that a triple or a quad? That one. Quad. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, quad. So I might read out the guidelines on the aroma. The aroma says we should see a complex, fairly intense mix of rich maltiness and deep fruit, accentuated by spicy phenols and alcohol.
That's it. A spicy phenol. That's what I'm getting.
I think. I got a different beer to you guys. I got just a tiny bit of phenol, but it wasn't triple. It wasn't like a triple at all. It was just subtle. The malt flavour is moderately high to high, and a deep bready toasty base with dark caramel notes, but no impression of dark or roasted malt. No chocolate malt or roasted barley. Esters are strong to moderately low and reminiscent of raisins, plums, dried cherries, big dates, or prunes. Spicy phenols like black pepper or vanilla, not clove, may be present as a low to moderate background character. A soft, spicy, perfumey or rose-like alcohol is low to moderate, but never hot or solvent-like. Hops are usually not noticeable, but if present, can add a light, spicy, floral, or herbal character. Did you guys pick up any hops in that?
No.
I didn't.
Anytime the word prunes mentioned, I think of my grandmother who used to shovel prunes down our throat to make us go to the toilet.
Yeah.
She'd basically go, oh, you got to have a couple of prunes because that keeps you regular. And it's like, oh, really, Grandma, do we have to have more prunes? It's like, oh, yeah, they're really good for you. But figs as well. Like, I mean, I think, you know, it's not something that most people, I don't think we'd eat figs regularly. You know, most Australians, like occasionally you get them on the side of a cheese plate or something like that. But figs is not something you come across. Raisins and you know, plums and stone fruit, yeah. And but again, like it's not often that you get those cooked, really. Like, I mean, certainly not in our climate. Like, I don't know, you know, usually if you're eating a plum, it's cold out of the fridge, you know. So, and that's got a fairly.
Oh, no, I used to have it as a kid all the time. We used to have prunes and ice cream all the time, and also plums.
Really?
Stewed plums.
Stewed plums.
Always,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I never had stewed plums. You're a little bit older than me, though, Chris.
My guess is though, when you get more to this sort of figs, I get prune in this, but I think you'll get more into those vinous characters and raisins and all that as the beer ages.
Yeah.
Is that fair enough? I think ours might be too young to get all those sort of things, and you might find even as they age. But they sound more like those older character beers. Mine. I get dates on mine, but not those. Yeah. Still too young to get those older type things. Yeah.
So that's an interesting question, Alex. Like, so you're only 2 years old, but are you storing beers and then doing, like, you know, vertical tastings on a 2019 and 2020, 21, that sort of stuff? Are you doing that, or is it just punching them out?
I mean, yeah, we don't have, like, I think there's not many beers we've done like a year apart that we could do that. Like, we do we do like keep cans and like go back and taste them just partly for quality control, just to see how they're tasting. Yeah, like when we put like this kind of beer like does age quite well. We put like a 5-year best before on it, and like our view is that like this kind of thing would age just as well in a can as a bottle. Definitely, like there's some concern that like sour beers might not age too well in cans because they're too acidic and it can attack the can liner. But something like this, it's like a high relative normal pH, should have no problem aging in the can.
A good case for bottles in that case, for those ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got a couple of your cellar-worthy beers and stuff like that, and the barrel-aged stuff. But my cellar is usually fairly empty because I tend to drink them before they get cellared. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, I always have this grand idea that like every year I buy I'll buy a 6-pack of like Cooper's Vintage, and I think I'll put like 2 of those away and drink 4 of them, but they never seem to get in the fridge. So unless I bought like this one here, which I bought like 3 vintages of that Phoenix from Hargraves Hill, but I bought them all at the same time. I didn't buy them like over the past 3 years. I just went out and bought like 3 vintages, and I'm already into them. So yeah, I'm not very good with self-control like that.
Yeah, I think beer drinkers haven't got into sort of vintage stuff yet. Like the wine people, like they just a standard issue. They buy a case and maybe have one, but the rest always goes in the cellar and comes out, several years later, depending on what the age requirement might be, given specific grape types and things like that. But I don't think well, there are people who do it in the beer world, but I think it's much less understood.
Yeah. I think wine drinkers are just amateurs, mate. That's the problem.
You see why people like the big things at the moment are hazy IPAs, and you get them in 6 months and you're pouring them down the sink. So when everyone wants to drink West Coast IPAs, hazy, they're not the beers to be cellared. But if people get onto these sort of things, they're the beers that people will go, yeah, we'll set that aside. We'll set that barley wine aside. But in some way, and sours. So sours and hazies are the big things at the moment in craft beer. You can see why no one wants to cellar them. They're, drink them pretty well ASAP.
Yeah, that's right. Quickly before they go off.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we go on to taste?
Yep, for sure.
All right. Have a taste of your beer, and I'll read as we go. So flavour, rich and complex maltiness, but not heavy in the finish. The flavour character is similar to the aroma. Same malt, ester, phenol, alcohol, and hop comment apply here as well. Moderately malty rich on the palate, which can have a sweet impression if bitterness is low. Usually moderately dry to dry finish, although maybe up to moderately sweet. Medium low to moderate bitterness. Alcohol provides some of the balance to the malt. Generally malty-rich balance, but can be fairly even with bitterness. The complex and varied flavours should blend smoothly and harmoniously, and often benefit from age. The finish should not be heavy or syrupy.
Interesting.
What do you think? Did he hit the mark?
Yeah,
what do you think?
I reckon you did in about 99% of those things. Yeah, like it's really interesting because my memory of drinking these styles of beers, if I would have just because it's not something I drink a lot of, but I would have described them as syrupy and sweet and with long sort of clawing sort of flavors. But the description of it says not, and this beer is on style for that. And I was also surprised that it was a Pilsner malt too, because I would have figured I love Pilsners. It's one of my favourite styles, and I love the fact that they finish sharp and clean. But if I was going off memory and talking about this style of beer, I would have gone, they claw, they hang around your mouth, they're really syrupy, they're really sweet, but this doesn't do any of that, and that's what the description said it should be too. So, yeah, it's weird how you remember things,
Yeah. So this beer is actually, in terms of the guidelines, this is like right at the top end of the final gravity, like residual sweetness or slightly over. So this is actually like sweeter, like at the top end of the sweetness or even sweeter than the guidelines. But I feel these days there's so many beers out here they're like a really sweet that maybe this doesn't appear that sweet to drinkers these days.
No, I don't get sweetness. No. Sorry, go on.
I think from a market perspective, yeah, that works. Because I'll take like the Chimay and I'll drink that and I'll go, oh, I wish there was more finish on that. It just finishes real dry. And so, yeah, I think just from a market perspective, I prefer it up the higher end, more like this. Because sometimes, what's the thing with the Belgian beers? They're supposed to finish like bone dry, supposed to just, they talk about digestibility. In other words, they have the yeast just eat through all the sugars. There's nothing left. But I actually, I prefer this sort of finish because I sort of finish, it's dry and it's gone. And I'm like, oh, where did it go? Even though that's the style and that's, yeah, I think I prefer this. Yeah, I definitely like this finish better. That's just me, but probably everyone else too.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I really, like as I said, my recollection would be that this would claw on the tongue and hang around for ages. It's weird because I can still get the mouthfeel in there. It's still like I would call it's a medium to a medium mouthfeel, and it's sort of hanging around the tongue. So it's nice, but it's not clawing and it's not sweet and it's not syrupy. It's nice dry. And I can imagine, as with most Belgian beers, go awesome with some nice creamy cheeses as well. And I would imagine, I was gonna grab some, but the cheese that I had wasn't probably appropriate. But I would imagine that going through Belgium, that would have been part of the experience too, Alex. Just munching on.
Yeah, I mean, I think out of all the types of beers, I reckon these like Abbey style Belgian beers are probably the best to pair with food.
Yeah. Cool.
Does anyone pick up a hint of licorice in this?
Oh.
It could just be the way my brain processing the burnt caramel and those toffee flavours, but also pick up a bit of licorice in it too. That could just be me. I don't know.
Well,
Are you drinking the Fourfold or the Solitude?
Oh, sorry, I'm on Solitude.
Yeah, it's different. Like similar, but yeah.
Yeah.
Is that in the style at all? Any kind of licorice and these sort of flavours?
And a seed.
I didn't see it. It wasn't in the style guidelines, but it's that sort of beer, right? They're those sort of flavours that are kind of end up in there.
Yeah.
It could be herbal, which is kind of a herbal sort of smell, so that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, Simon, is there anything else we need to know about this style and the guidelines?
No, I think we've hit it pretty well. And I think this has been a really, I mean, I'm no guru on this, but it seems to me what it should be like. Like you said, it finished a bit sweeter. But you've got all those big flavours, right? All those dates and the burnt caramel flavours that you want. And they're beers that finish quite dry, very bubbly, and good head, good lacing on your glass. Yeah. And that's Belgian double, I think. That's how I think of it anyway.
Quad. I didn't actually get a lot of foam on mine, and it didn't lace. I guess I sort of thought it might, but you said that was probably because you couldn't get enough CO2 in there. Was that the story, or?
Yeah, I mean, it should still have more lacing. Like, I don't know why. Like, definitely, like, the Solitude one looks like it has better lacing, but this Fourfold doesn't. I know, like, alcohol levels, like, negatively impact kind of, like, that foam, like, and, like head retention and lacing, but, like, at 10.5%, we should still be able to get better lacing than that. So, I'm not really sure why that was.
This one absolutely had great lacing, really distant head all the way through too.
Alcohol's a killer for head retention. It's just a killer. But also, It might get better with age, right? Like you said, mine was better, but mine's older, right? Like,
Yeah, it does. Like I find with the can conditioning, like sometimes it takes a bit longer to get like really like fine bubbles, like because it generates, we package it still and it generates the carbonation over a couple of weeks. But sometimes to start with, I don't know, it's just I don't know like the exact science behind it, but it feels like the you get finer bubbles and better head retention after like a month or two.
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I posted an article, I forget where it was from, one of the American beer craft sites and so on, about foam and how it's developed and what causes it and the science of it and so on. And that speaks quite deeply about, how what the different effects are depending on alcohol and all kinds of sort of variants that cause it to go into a sort of like a very big foam or a very sort of open foam or just a dissipating one that just collapses straight away. So there's a bit of stuff, a bit of work going on it, but it's kind of a dark science, I think.
It sounds like the opposite of like a hop crash or something like that, is it? Like where it takes a while for it just to settle with hops, but sometimes it might take a bit of time for it to grow with the carbonation. Sounds like. The other thing I'll just pick up on here is at the last part of the BJCP guidelines, it talks about style comparisons. This is interesting. It's like a lager Belgian double with a fuller body and increased malt richness. Not as bitter or hoppy as a Belgian triple, but of similar strength. So there's something that I'm just picking up on. So saying similar strength as a triple, but not as bitter or hoppy. So compared to your triple, Alex, does that sound true?
I mean, our triple is like 8.5% alcohol, so it's definitely
lower,
less.
Yeah.
And
is it more hoppy?
But I think
triple.
Triples, like I feel triples vary a lot in terms of how hoppy they are. Some of them can be quite hoppy, but a lot of them kind of don't have much hops. I'd say our triple is on the lower end of bitterness. It's more like the flavors you're getting is all from the yeast. We're not getting a whole lot of hop flavor in our triple.
Right. Okay, well, we're coming up to the 1 hour mark. I think we've covered off on most things. I'll just quickly rip around and see if anybody wants anything else. Will, did you have any more questions for Alex, or did you want to throw anything else in, mate?
I think you covered it pretty well, actually, and my understanding of the style. I mean, you can read guidelines, but sometimes just somebody else reading them out kind of just clicks in the head a little bit better. So that was pretty cool, and big takeaway around that, fermenting cooler versus the higher fermentation temperatures, which you often do with Belgium. So big takeaway there. That was cool.
Cool. Thank you. Chris, did you have any questions or anything else you wanted to chuck in?
Yeah, I did. It relates to a question you asked about, why did Alex go down that path of European beers? And it makes me wonder why we're so fixated on American style when there's so much to be gained from understanding the European traditions and things, which is the oldest, some of the oldest beers on the planet, style-wise.
Squirrel.
And it's redolent. It's rich and redolent with a variety of different things. And I'm so glad Slow Lane do that, because otherwise we'd be all the poorer for it. So thank you for doing that.
All right.
Absolutely. What he said. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many styles out there. Like, it's a shame when you go to like a beer bar and like all the taps are basically two styles across 15 taps. Like, there's
Pale Ale, IPA, Pale Ale, IPA.
Yeah. Like I like to drink.
Yeah, it's not lucky that you're the only one because you got the market. But it's a shame that it's not more covered by really good breweries that do all kinds of really amazing beers, but so West Coast, so NEPA, so American centric, and they're lovely. I mean, I drink a lot of them, but it's so good to try some of the different styles from Europe, and yeah, that makes a difference to my palate too. That's the thing about this exploration through the world of beer, is that you develop all kinds of interesting sort of directions with your palate as well. And I think Slow Lane, the first thing was a double bock that I had, and that was a mind-blowing experience for me.
Liquid bread.
So, yeah, it was. It was pretty extraordinary. So I couldn't believe it, actually.
Yeah. So I guess that's why we're trying to educate people, Chris, is to let them know that that there is more than one style of lager.
More than 80 salad.
Yeah, and to but interestingly, I know where, and that's I guess part of the thing with the craft beer market is that there's all this excitement about the next big squirrel that comes along, and then like the next shiny thing. But if we try and educate people about different styles and things that are available, hopefully they go out and try them, and they it just gives them that thirst or the education or the interest to go out and try new styles, because
well, the folks who love the IPA, the IIPA, and the IIIPA, and the IIIPA, they really
just keep adding letters. Just keep adding them.
The quads, because they're so great, and 10% and really fantastic flavors and beautiful savouring. It warms as it gets more flavour. Some of it warms. It's got so much character. It's a wonder people haven't sort of taken to it. But anyway,
I think so. If we just remember that little meme though of the craft beer drinker that starts off drinking lagers and then goes to pale ales and then goes to IPA and it comes back to lagers. Like, I think the thing is we've got so many people in that sort of like that pale ale IPA stage at the moment. I think they will come around, but they're just a little bit late to the party. Like everybody else that started investigating the craft beer market more than.
Yeah, I've got this theory they're addicted to lupulin, and it's sort of like a hop craze phase thing.
Yeah, but like everything, it'll pass. It'll pass.
It's the malt that really makes the difference, I reckon.
Malt's where it's at, baby. Malt's where it's at.
That's it.
No, candy sugar. Candy sugar's where it's at. Candy sugar. That's the star of the show today. Candy sugar.
Oh, that's it.
All right, Simon, did you have any other questions for Alex or anything you wanted to add?
No, not too much. Just on Chris's point about it being so Americanized, the fact that we said earlier, and this is a symptom of it, we said, I think you said, Nigel, so you add candy syrup, that would be an adjunct. When in Belgian beers, that's standard place. I don't like to add candy syrup, light candy syrup, amber, dark candy syrup, but there's this thing in America about adjuncts, and it's all going to be all malt. It's all going to be an all malt grist. So that actually, the fact that we sort of even talk about adjuncts in a sense is a symptom of that Americanization and the way we think about beer. Yeah.
So I'll just chuck in on that, because I asked the question because of my poor understanding of brewing techniques, right? So but I just wanted to be able to go, okay, does that fit in that box? It wasn't to be like, I wasn't taken away that if it's got an adjunct, it's no good, because most American lagers are adjuncts, like they're corn and whatever, but I wasn't thinking of it. I didn't think of that as a negative. I was just going, okay, that's something I don't know. I need to ask that question. So
no, it's okay, and you were right. But I think just the fact that we call it adjunct, like it's something extra that we add, but this isn't. This is something that's part of their brewing tradition. It just sort of shows the way we think about beer, or the way we talk about beer, how it has been shaped by that sort of American sort of, that idea. Or maybe even partly that German idea of brewing, because they don't add
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to come up. That was my response. Is like, you know, so I'm more a fan of German style beers than I am of Belgian. So I've got that Riser Gabalt thing going in the back of my head. Oh, he's added something to it. We should shoot him now. Yeah, none of that. So but that's not why I asked the question. It was just because I was like, okay, that I just wanted to know. All right, over to you, Alex. Final word.
I think we covered everything off pretty well there. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Oh, mate.
When are you coming back, Alex? We'll do another one. We'll do another
The double box.
Yeah, we've got. I think we did somewhere along the email chain or whatever. We did talk about another style down the track, so I'll have to chase that up. But yeah, if you would like to come back, we'd love to have you come back again at a later stage and talk about some more of your beers because yeah, like I said, I love what you're doing, and yeah, we'll definitely want to educate people more about all the awesome lagers that are around.
Yeah, that'd be like another Belgian or American, do a German style in the future.
Yeah,
good.
So what's the style I was going to say? So Bohemian Pils or Czech Pale Lager. Like if you can brew one of those and put my name on it, that'd be appreciated. And no, there was another. What's the
Oh, Nigel, you were saying you wanted a triple dry hop hazy IPA. That's what you were saying.
yeah.
Milkshake IPA with peaches, cream, and blueberries. I think you mentioned. Wasn't that one?
Lots of milk in it, please.
Oh, can I just rattle off a few styles I'd like you to brew for me, Alex? Beerducation.
Oh yeah.
Old Brune. And I'll get caught out on this for sure. Lichtenheiner.
Oh, the light German beer, the light German lager. Yeah.
And Rogan beer too. Rogan beer. That's another style.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Are they the rye ones?
That's a real rye and malt driven beer.
You've got to be able to sell it. You've got to be able to sell it.
Mate, no.
Don't worry about that.
Don't worry about all that. Don't worry about all those commercial issues and stuff like that. Just brew beer that we like to drink.
So it's fine.
Yeah.
Corruption of beers.
No, Rogan beer. Can you brew one of those, mate?
Maybe that. That's a potential.
Is it okay instead of doing Beechwood? Can you do like that Manuka? That Manuka malt's really nice. Do a Rogan beer with. Is that okay, Nigel? Is that still a Rogan beer? Can we do a Manuka smoked Rogan beer rather than a Beechwood smoked one?
Specialty German rye beer originally brewed in Regensburg, Bavaria. Okay, that.
Rogan beer, not Ralph beer. Oh.
No, not a Ralph beer. No, Rogan beer. No. It sounds like I just read the thing on it once, and I've never heard anybody brew one before, and it's a real malt-driven beer. So, if you could just brew me one of those, Alex, that'd be awesome.
Sure.
Okay.
Monday.
Monday, awesome. All right, we'll see you next week.
Monday.
Oh, okay. I thought you said Monday. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, Alex. Really appreciate it. Thanks everybody else for joining in. Thanks to William for joining us from across the ditch, and cheers and thanks for everybody for being here. Really enjoyed it.
Go. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Beautiful. Well done. Thank you, everybody.
See ya.
Have a good one.
Cheers.